My name is Butina. Um, and as you can, I don't know if you saw what just happened now. I cannot even get rid of a sidebar, so I'm a low-tech person, which is challenging given all this talk about AI. So when I got into KM, I said I'm a people's person. You have people, processing, and technology. I'm a people guy. But I guess we have to adapt and do it all, right? So if you had a chance to read the description of this session, that's what I proposed. I said, look, there's all talk about AI and technology, but are there other ways we can innovate? And so I thought that I would like to share something with this community, with everyone, something that I have no evidence about, because something that I just start experimenting with, but I think there's a lot of potential with, which is learning from another field, basically, learning from how other people do their job. Now, how many of you think that knowledge management matters for impact, for a better world, for whatever? Okay, good. So at the right conference, I guess. Now, let's get more specific. How many of you have a passion besides knowledge management? Okay, good. And how many of you think that that passion might be relevant to knowledge management work? Wow, that's awesome. So you can all join me next year. We can do another session like this where you bring your passion with knowledge management and see how they work together, because that's exactly what I'm doing here. So brief story. I've been in knowledge management for the past 5 years. I joined UNICEF in December. Before that, I've been with the World Bank Group for 5 years. I lived in the city for 9 years. When I got here as a student in DC, I was doing totally different stuff. I was doing European studies, international relations, and my plan was to get my master's and go back to Europe, work for the EU. Wrong. That was 2008, and sorry if I don't know if I'm supposed to mention politics, but I fell in love with the Obama campaign. Reason was because they were doing grassroots organizing. I'm a community guy. In KM, I did spend a lot of time doing community practice, so anything community, I love it. And when I learned that the Obama campaign was doing community organizing, I was like, after my master's, I don't want to go to Europe, I want to do community organizing. There's a problem. Not being American and having a $3,000 loan, and being a community organizer is not a career where you can earn money. Basically, you do it because you believe in it. You earn some money, but not enough to pay back loans, or it's going to take a while. You start to volunteer. I mean, there's no way I could have done that. So long story short, I went to communications. Through communications at the World Bank, I got into community of practice. Community of practice went to knowledge management. But I did not forget about community organizing. So when I had a chance last year to sign up for a Harvard course, online Harvard course by the Kennedy School of Government, Executive Education, I took it, invest my own money, and I had a chance to also practice it, because in course, actually, it was really cool. Not only you learn the theory, but they don't accept you unless you have a project to apply it. And this, as you know, is perfect learning. If I'm learning theory, not applying, I'm not really learning. But if I'm applying it, I'm really learning. So that's how I actually learned the model. It's not just theory. I practiced it. And I had a chance to do this for a year, learning the course and applying it from in activities I was doing besides my job. And then the key question, how can I bring this, what I learned, which is so powerful, and I hope you will find it powerful, into what I do in my profession? And now, as I end up in UNICEF, which has a beautiful mission, which is about protecting children's rights, helping not only survive, but also thrive and express their potential. How can I connect community organizing to help knowledge management to achieve impact for children? So now it all in theory makes sense, but it's very difficult to do it. Let's see together how this could work. So brief intro on how this session will be structured. I'm going to present community organizing first, the key concept, very brief. Each of these concepts can be one-day workshop. But it's very brief overview. And then I will tell you how I introduced this first to the World Bank Group last 2 months before I left, and then how I'm trying to apply it to my work at UNICEF. So the concrete application. And what I would love to hear from you is, in the meantime, just fast thinking, no judgment. I would love to see at the end if we can have some ideas, interactions on how you could apply it, right? So community organizing really is a leadership model. It's about leadership. Is leadership intended as a way to empower other people to achieve the change they want by using the resources they have. And everyone has resources, everyone has power, and everyone can grow the power to achieve the change. So is leadership not where the leader is like the big person who knows it all, is a born as leader, but it's about you are a good leader if you empower other people. So now I'm thinking the sessions I've been to these days, I think yesterday was mentioned, KM people, we need to be in the rooms where decisions are made. We cannot just deal with the consequences, of decisions taken. Whether it's on technology or culture change, we need to be in a room. What does it mean? We need to be leaders. So maybe this could be useful, just a hint. I don't know. So that's how do you, so that was the big overview. Now, the cool thing is that community organs have been done for not centuries, but decades. It's way before Obama. He's the one who brought on big scale in politics, but it was done in activism, civil rights movement. Think about that. The Farmers United in southwestern U.S. Even think about women's rights. The workers' rights movements in the early 1900s. And it doesn't have to be only this. The big organizations really good at that is even the NRA. Remember this, and this is what I think is also good hint for us as KMers. Good organized group of people is more powerful than the big numbers, and even money sometimes. If you're well organized, you can actually take control of actions even in organizations. Maybe we can take control of our organizations, maybe. So the Harvard course teaches you a very straightforward model that's based on experience. Marshall Gantz is the community organizer guru. He's been doing this since his, student years. Started with the civil rights movement, went to Southwest US for the Farmers United workers, and then basically he took the practice and created a theoretical model, which is this one. So it's all starts with the people. Who are my people, right? And about the goals you want to achieve, the change you want to achieve. Of course, you have to have goals to achieve change, right? Driven by values, what you believe in. That's why I ask you, what do you think knowledge management matters, right? What are we driven as knowledge matters, and what values do we have? And it's about leadership. The 5 steps model is about empowering people to achieve change is by having a shared story. It's about public narrative. Is about having shared relationships, so building a community of committed people who are committed to something. It's about having good structure. So this is where I like it because it gets hard. Structure and strategy, and finally action. So it goes really from theory to action. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna go over the model very, very briefly, and if you have questions later, we can talk more, but step by step. So let's start with the let's just another quick intro on community organizing. What I liked about it is that sometimes, we all heard how important storytelling is, right? I think even in this KM World Conference, we heard, the narrative, storytelling, because that's what drives us. I mean, I don't need to spend time on this. We all know it, I think. What moves our actions is not the logic, it's not reason, it's not data. That's important for decision making, but in the end, we're gonna be moved to action because we are moved by something, by a good story, by emotions, right? However, emotions alone, good story, is not gonna help us reach a goal unless we have good strategy. So really, organizing is about putting together the strategy, the structure, the hard stuff, the head stuff with the heart, which is the narrative. And in the end, if we don't have action, we have no impact. That goes without saying. So let's start with storytelling. When I started the course, I was like, why are we spending a whole session on storytelling? This is why, because if you want to get people to action, you need to be able to reach out to their hearts. And I know it sounds very, I don't know, like a romantic comedy, whatever, but like this is how it is. So story is structured, is about building public narrative, right? So it's about having a story of a community that we know through the storytelling that why we are moved to do something, right? So we have to have this shared narrative. It starts with us. And I always tell people, if I don't know my story, I cannot build it with my community. Think about if you ever work with communities of practice or any other kind of community. If those people don't know why they're there, it's not gonna be a strong community. It's just not going to happen. So it starts with every person be clear about why I'm part of this community, why I want to do this, what I'm moved about, and then people sharing and finding the common threads, and then what they together. And the other thing is the now. Like why what we want to do matters now, not yesterday, not tomorrow. And as I was here again, think about the reasons, like do we need to start acting because the technology is like all of a sudden like coming into our world and we need to react. Is that a reason maybe for us to get to do something? Think of whatever reason you have to move, to get to action now. Why now and why not tomorrow? So that's basically building a sense of purpose, right? Me and what I want to achieve, sense of community, me with others, and sense of urgency, why we need to act together now. So I'm thinking right now, so this is the first part, public narrative. Why public narrative is the first step of community organizing. And if I think about that, I work with UNICEF, we're part of the UN system, United Nations, Sustainable Development Goals. You know, by 2030, we want to achieve big changes for humanity, or as for children in particular. Why now? Well, 2030 is tomorrow. We need to act now. This is applied to my organization, for example. Climate change is happening now, not tomorrow. So think about in your organization, why is now? Why now matters. So next one is relationships. We can have a beautiful story. We feel that we belong together, but we need relationships. And there's a beautiful story from the Obama campaign when it ended. He got elected. And they did march against the interviews with those who did the local organizing teams. So what drew people to volunteers, and that was, I think, the biggest volunteering political engagement ever. Like, his ground game was incredible. What drove people to join the campaign was the narrative. You know, if you remember 2008, the narrative, what he represented. But what made people stay was not the candidate, was not the narrative, were the team members, the community. So people kept coming back, volunteers hours now, people who left jobs, people who left studies, people who sacrificed family lives for this goal. Was not the candidate in the end, was not a narrative, was the community. And the model teaches you how to build relationships one-on-one. So this is the best part for me. When I took the course, this is where I performed the highest on these one-on-ones, because I told you earlier, I'm a people person. And you know, when I joined UNICEF, the first thing I did, I was finding the people I want to connect with, calling them. I did a lot of one-on-ones. I do this spontaneously. But what the model teaches you is how to do it strategically. So I'm just going to, there are other tools, by the way, in relationship building. I took the one that I think is the most relevant. The one-on-one basically is when you meet a person to build relationships. So think about, I don't know, you're building community. The first thing, you have to be clear about the purpose of the meeting. And the advice is also, if it's half an hour, keep it half an hour. If it's 1 hour, an hour, right? Now, in some cultures, I tested this because I work with people from different cultures. Don't be, everything in the model is like, don't be strict. It's not set in stone. There are cultures like the Latin cultures who like talking more, let them talk more. You know, like, don't force people. This is culture awareness is important. Be sensitive. But you start always with first, why we're meeting, remind the person. Second, exploration. Don't start getting into business immediately. I do this mistake sometimes as well at work. I meet someone and I'm like, okay, let's talk about business, why we're meeting. No, let's try to get to know the person, you know, especially meeting the first time. Because when you're talking about the exploration, the ask and answer, the first thing you do with a person is to find the values of that person, what they believe in. For example, why doing this job? Why in this organization? Let's try to find commonalities. It might be about something else, some passions, hobbies they have. Get to know the human being behind that you have in front of you. Now, especially for those from Latin and Mediterranean cultures, don't get lost into this. It can last hours. This happens. At some point, stop. Don't be rude, but stop and try to move to business now, right? And that's the exchange. Okay, try to find the skills that person is good at. And this is amazing. Like, this is super helpful to find what a person is good at. The day I need a designer, the day I need someone who has a transportation means to get somewhere. This is the piece of the creation when I find that. And keep it in mind, write it somewhere. If you're building a community, this is how you know what they're good at. And finally, this is the best part of all, which I never did in my spontaneous one-on-ones, but now I learned to do it, although sometimes I forget, I have to admit. Commitment. Never leave a meeting without commitment. Commitment means, you don't go with, you can have an agenda, but try not, like, for example, in organizers say, you know, we have this phone banking on Wednesday, can you come? That can be a commitment, you can have that goal. First of all, don't force the person to do what they don't want to do. Volunteering community is a big no. Don't force people. They do it if they want it. It's about passion, but it's about wanting to do something. But commitment can be something that you can ask the person to do because you figure out through the conversation. for example. But make sure to have a commitment, because this helps you build culture of commitment, which is so essential in volunteering. So this is where community organizing is strong, why it works, because volunteering, the biggest failure, if you have experience in nonprofits and so on, is that people say, I'm going to do something, and then they don't show up. If we use an organizer, this is a disaster. Like, I'm thinking of an action with 20 people, 5 show up. It's a big fail. But if I build a culture of commitment, I know that people will actually be more likely to come. And this is where I can prove it, because I did it, and it works. And it's every time you ask a person to commit something, you're building a culture of commitment. And you ask them to do the same with others. It's really a shared culture of commitment you're building, which is so essential when in volunteering. And I would say even in professional work. I mean, people don't do stuff just because they're paid or because the boss tells them. Sometimes they do better stuff when they want to do them, right? So, I don't know, just an idea. But commitment, then never leave a meeting without a commitment. Commitment can be something like, if you don't have anything, say, hey, how about we have another chat next week? You can be honest about that. Say, I'd like to learn more about you, and so on. But don't leave it without commitment, unless a person's not interested at all. I mean, don't waste that person's time, your time. That goes without saying. So never leave a meeting without commitment. Second, the famous snowflake, famous for those who have been exposed to organizing, with volunteers, you cannot impose things. They're just not going to do them. You cannot even say, hey, everyone does whatever they want. It's just a disaster. So the model that community organizers use is like, there's always a center, an organizer, who empowers other leaders. So the people, you see the person center is connected to lead their own small teams, right? And those people can actually lead other teams. And so think of Snowflake that develops that way. Now, this is important because, again, creates leadership levels, so everyone can be a leader as a follower at the same time. And so, by the way, when the leader center moves on, this happens in campaigns all the time, the next person, someone can step in. So you're building human capital. You're making sure that someone moves on, you have someone as good as, maybe better, definitely not worse, who can replace a person. So this is amazing if you think about a volunteer organization. Again, I think it's super applicable to any community of practice. If you have an independent, core group of volunteers, et cetera, responsibilize people, empower them. And the way it works is the goals are decided at a high level together. Not every volunteer has to have a say. It's like you have a strategy, but then the way you do it, the tactics, you let them to the volunteers. So this is where you have no hierarchy. The hierarchy is about you have to have a strategy. You have to know what you want to achieve, but the how, the tactics, is left to the volunteers. Why? Because they know that their environment the best. For example, if you think of territory, if I'm from LA, I cannot tell Florida people what to do, right? They know Florida better. In professional environments, if I'm in one department, I probably let other departments figure out their own tactics. I'm not going to tell them from central headquarters team, everyone, now we do the same thing, right? So empower people to do things the way they know the best, as long as they achieve the results. That's what matters for us in the center, right? Snowflake, by the way, this is the part on the structure. This is number 3. So we talked about public narrative. This is the relationship building. This is the Snowflake, which is part of structure. But there are other instruments that I could talk about, but we have no time for that. And I used also it at work. So strategizing. When I start applying community organizing, not in my profession, but my other thing, I had people who joined this movement, let's call it, who had other experiences in doing volunteer work, activism. And they told me, what I like about this? There's a strategy. I know exactly every action I take, how it impacts the bigger goal. And this is often missing so much in volunteering. People are asked to do things, to volunteer their time, their precious time, and they're like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I mean, I know the big picture, but how this helps the big picture, I don't know. And then they get frustrated, they get demotivated, they stop doing it. But this makes sure that every action you're doing, and you strategize together, by the way, not in a room with 3-4 people. This is like every team strategizes together on how to achieve together the goal, choose the tactics. You know this way that whatever you're doing is because we decide together, and I know exactly how to reach the goal. But basically, if you think about it, you start with foundation, which is the resources you have. Look at the capacity. I have 3 people, let's say. These people have these skills. think about the resources you have. People, the first resources, they have skills. You can have other resources. For example, we have access to a room or transportation, whatever. Think about all the resources you have. That's a foundation, the starting point. We have a goal to reach. The goal is one essential step towards the big change we want to achieve, the long-term vision, right? And to achieve the goal, I decided timeline, realistic, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, can be half a year, 1 month, doesn't matter. And then you plan the tactics. The way you do it, first you brainstorm. You know, brainstorming, no idea is stupid, everyone says things. You can use the wall and to put write down ideas. And then, after people brainstorm the tactics and how, starting with the resources you have to get to the goal you want to achieve, you basically double check the tactics and say, is this tactic feasible in the timeline? Do we have the resources right now to kick it off? I mean, some tactics might be expensive, like we just don't have resources for that. And third, is it relevant to the goal? This is where actually you can easily, and there's no gonna be dramas, no one's gonna get mad because it's clear, it's done with everyone. If sometimes people have ideas and they look great, and everyone says, yeah, wonderful idea, and you're like, yeah, but not relevant. I don't know if you ever have been, I've been in so many of these situations. Like someone has this wonderful idea, maybe it's charismatic, and everyone is like, yeah, let's do it. And you're like, I don't know how to kill it, but we need to kill it. It's not a good idea for this. This model helps you because it's going to be, oh, wonderful idea. I like it. Let's park it. And you ask, you don't say it doesn't achieve the goal. You say, does it achieve the goal? And then people are like, oh, yeah, not. It doesn't achieve the goal. And then you authorize to park it. You're not being rude. You're not shutting up anyone. You park it for next time, right? So it's a great model. It really works. In my experience, never failed. Basically, what is important is that by each tactic, you build more resources. If you're not building resources, you're failing. If at 5 tactics, I'm at the same number of people, same skills, I'm failing. So it's not just about achieving the goal, but it's also growing resources. And this, I don't know your experience at KM, my experience where I am, I need resources. So if I'm applying this in my work, and I'm talking about work now, not volunteering, and I'm not getting more resources, I'm failing. So this is super helpful even at least in my work. Now, once you decide the strategy, the tactics, and you strategize, action is super easy, really. The way I do it, I just do again on the wall with a team. I write down the tactics we decided, the first tactic, because you need to now go to micro level. I take the first tactic, the kickoff tactic, and then I put it there, and then together with the team, I say, okay, to get this done can be, I don't know, a launch event, can be online thread, I don't know, I'm thinking out knowledge management activities, a webinar, whatever. Think of the tactic, break into small steps, tasks that need to be done, and then see when they need to be done in order, so you order them, what needs to be done as a task, and then who's going to do that. And we're going back to commitment. I'm not telling people are volunteering, right? And if people volunteer in front of everyone, they make the commitment. Remember, the one-on-ones are helping us already building cultural commitment. And in front of a room, if they commit, I can say never fails, but most likely it will not fail. They will do it. And this is very simple. And as an organizer, by the way, my responsibility is to follow up, with the people who have done the task, who are about to do it and so on. By the way, this is a cool thing because I don't mind reminding people doing things. When I do surveys, I nag people until I get 90%, basically. I don't, I think you said yes, your session. Of course, I take away people who responded, but then I have no problems. And I was so happy when the professor said, yes, in organize, you have to remind people. Don't worry about reminding them. You're not being, annoying. Do it. And I was like, okay, good. I haven't been rude when I was doing that. So this is the action. So again, 5 steps. Storytelling, public narrative to motivate us, to have a shared story, the sense of purpose, the why, the one-on-one relationship building, culture of commitment. Snowflake, having a structure that works, especially volunteers. Strategizing is about how I transfer the resources I have into growing them to achieve the goals towards the higher purpose. And finally, breaking the biggest, the actions into micro tasks and making sure that people take responsibility on a volunteer base and they commit to that in front of other ones. Now, I hope you're thinking about how, if this is relevant, how you can apply it. Let me tell you how I try to apply it. So, no-brainer. I worked, when I was at the World Bank, my main area, I would say 80% of my time was communities of practice. And this is community organizing, is community building. To me, community building is a macro area that includes everything: digital communities, communities of interest, communities of practice, community organizing, which is communities of action in our, I guess, KM lingo. But basically, to me, this is applying this community practice is obvious, especially those communities that are not sponsored, like that are more bottom up, if you think of formality of a community, because it gives you structure and where people take responsibility is shared. I don't know if you ever have been a leader, volunteer leader. Sometimes we take too much on ourselves, end up doing too much. You're leading a group and like, gosh, I'm doing everything. This allows you to avoid that trap. You're the last one to take responsibility. You overview, but you make sure others take responsibility. And this is not having others do tasks you tell them. They do the task they want, and by the way, they're empowered because they're the leaders of the task, and they need people, they lead those people. So we talk not always about empowerment in that sense. So to me, I played, the last 2 months at the bank before going to the UNICEF, I did this workshop in Bali for an Indonesian agency. The World Bank has this program where they basically help governments build their own KM capacity. My colleagues asked me to do a session on communities of practice. And I was like, great opportunity to experiment the model. I was like, can I do whatever I want? Yes. You are the expert. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do something I've never done. It's not proven. I have no evidence. I'm going to teach these people how to do community to a way I have never used before. Not my usual way that I was in the bank, but something new. And it's, so the sad thing, if you're consultants, the bad thing about this is that you don't see the results because, they pay you to go to the workshop, and then that's it. And even if you want to stay in touch, by the way, you cannot because of whatever formalities. Basically, I did a workshop and left, so I don't know the impact. But what was good about the workshop is that, and I will tell you now shortly what I used of this model, not everything because every part can be one-day workshop, is that by the end of the day, the participants were highly energized and motivated. We had 6 C's community of practice, so at least 5, 6 people for each. It was a big room with a lot of people from this agency. They defined the purpose. They defined the clear goals. They defined the structure based on this model. And in the end, they left the room with clear commitments. Like every person that seed community knew exactly what they're going to do, when, and why, because we defined a purpose. In one day, which is a lot of like, you're exhausted after that. But so I don't know, I'm very honest. I'm not going to say, hey, it was amazing, they have amazing, I don't know what happened later, but I was so happy. It's the best workshop I ever did on COPs. So what I did in that workshop basically was using I was focusing on the structure. So they find not a story, because storytelling, you need really a day workshop on storytelling. Purpose is not a short thing. You cannot make it up in 15 minutes, right? But at least they find a domain, the purpose, the basic things. You don't need this for that. But the structure was important, And there is a beautiful model here where the tool that I can't even share, which basically says you decide who is going to take what responsibility based on, first of all, you decide responsibilities of this, let's call it now applied to the community practice. So usually in community practice, you have a core group, right? I don't know if I'm using terms that maybe use them in other ways, core team, core group, whatever, the center of the community, the leaders of a community, right? So first, I had them decide what roles are needed. So think about it. What do we need to do? What is the point of this community? What are the roles we need to get it done? Okay, we define the roles. Now, what skills do we need for those roles? And people say, okay, to be a coordinator, you need to have the experience. To be, do the communications, the relationship with other parts of the organization, whatever. They define the skills. And then last piece, what skills do you have that will make you a good candidate for this position? And you don't apply for one. You say it for, if you have skills for all 5 roles, you do all 5 roles. And you're not going to be forced to do it. It's volunteering. Like, no one forces you to do anything. But people can sign up for 5. And then through discussion, we decide together who's going to have what role, which is so different from the COPs that one person starts and that person is the leader for, like, I don't know, 2 years, or a manager says, you're gonna create a community of practice, you're gonna be the leader. This is like really people who say, we think this is a good community we need for whatever purpose in our agency, unless you end up with a role you did not expect. No one plans for it. It just comes up to this very rational process. So that was good. They come up with the very clear rules. And then we did strategizing. We said, okay, what is a big goal we want to achieve by, I don't know, I think they chose 6 months. They had a goal. And they did all this process, which is very long. You know, whenever you start brainstorming, it takes forever. So that's why this was a big chunk of it. And then at the end, they had a whole strategy between, let's say, now and the next 6 months. And the last part, we took the first tactic and decided who's going to do what and when. Wonderful workshop, 1 day, intense. And so this is what I did with this Indonesian agency. Now, last week before moving to New York, I went to DC to close my stuff with the World Bank, and I said, you know what? I want to share this model with the CAM community of World Bank. You know, I just want to leave something before I go. And I did this workshop with my colleagues in the CAM community, World Bank's community, and I focused again on I did one-on-ones this time. The one-on-ones that I think is so important for communities of practice, for relationship building purposes. So I said, you know, if you're a community manager, community lead, core group member, if you're responsible for the community, do one-on-ones, lots of one-on-ones. It's a lot of time you invest up front, but it pays off so much later. Like, it's the best investment you can do, one-on-ones. Don't be lazy, hey, I'm gonna have a call with 15 people. Do one-on-ones. Not with everyone, I mean, but the people that you think had the highest potential to get engaged. So one-on-ones is what I introduced. And I introduced SNOWFLAKE for the core group. You know how they can structure them better than usual way we're doing COPs in the World Bank before. And the strategizing and action. The good thing is that when I did the workshop with my colleagues, I had them take a commitment with each other. So they were doing the one-on-ones, and in the one-on-one, they had to do a commitment with one another. And I said, well, you're going to do it. So careful what you're doing. This is not just a workshop exercise. And I followed with them, and they said, yes, I met this person, and actually that person gave me these materials. So it was wonderful because even through workshop that had no purpose, whatever, but me sharing a model, people actually got to share things and get to know each other better, and there was concrete follow-up. Because the best way to learn, again, is to practice it, right? If you just hear theory and don't apply it, you're not going to learn. So and then we did, the actions in the end. It was the last piece I shared with them. I asked my colleagues who are leading the COP program at the World Bank right now how this is doing. They're working this. I introduced also a friend of mine who is a community organizing person to my former colleagues. He did another workshop with them to reinforce the model. And my colleague and friend told me that basically they are the biggest, most popular thing they integrated in the COP program at the World Bank is the 101. And that's like now part of the way how the World Bank does communities of practice. So that's what I heard. I asked if she has any evidence, but that I don't have, so I cannot share anything. I don't know what's going on. But I just know they integrated some of these materials. Now, last piece before we have our discussion. Let me just see, what time is it? Okay, we have 12 minutes, I think. I don't have much here because this is an ongoing work. So I got to UNICEF in December. Whenever you join a new organization, it takes you a while to get used to it, etc. But there was a big task, not a task, it's much more than that. Basically, we had to develop our first global knowledge management strategy. We have to because we're asked by UN system, UNICEF should have a global management strategy. Why don't you have it? And the way the organization see this is like, give me the strategy. That is like, I need to comply. And I was like, why don't we use this opportunity to actually, let's use this strategy, which could be another document that's going to be a repository. We have a strategy, yeah, we comply. But use this opportunity to actually mobilize the community of colleagues in UNICEF, and I will tell you what is important, why it's particular to UNICEF, and actually to try to make some change in knowledge management in the organization. So UNICEF is super decentralized. How many of you have really decentralized organizations? And I'm a centralized team, like I'm a very small team, and no power, not at all. I mean, we all have power, right? But formally, I have no power. I don't control anyone. But I'm in New York, and I have these colleagues spread around the world. And they had their own strategies and plans, and the country office, regional office divisions. I heard this morning the Philips talk was similar. But Philip is lucky because the CEO said we're going to have a strategy. In this case, we're doing it bottom up. Like we don't like we need to actually convince the leadership why this matters, right? So it's a completely different scenario. But what is similar to Philip's, what I heard this morning, is that we are highly decentralized. So people have their own ways of doing CAM, have their strategies, but there's nothing for the whole organization. So it was important for what I tried to do. I did not apply the model systematically, but I took some elements. So basically, the approach to strategy has been a community approach, whereas we started with having discussions in a Yammer group, dedicated Yammer group strategy, premises. Remember when I joined UNICEF, I said I did a lot of one-on-ones. So basically, people knew who I was. I was not saying, hey, here's a group, let's do the strategy together. They knew who I was. They know my name. We had conversations, et cetera, et cetera. So I had people, I knew that I had people I can rely on, a small core group, right? So then after having some online discussions about the purpose strategy, the priorities, et cetera, there was, by the way, surveys that were done before we could analyze. We took a radical approach. Instead of writing a strategy in a small room with like a few people, we decided to crowdsource it totally, radically. We decided to outline with the community, and then split the topics of the outline of the strategy in, I think that we had 6 topics, and then we had a call for volunteers. Basically, we said thanks everyone for commenting so far in Yammer. People comment, but that doesn't take much effort. I mean, I know that from community management it does take effort, but this is even more. I'm asking people to actually draft pieces, to provide in-depth comments, like to read everything they commit to read, etc. So we just split the strategy in 6 sections, and through form, just use the 4 Microsoft forms. Asked everyone to become a super volunteer. That's what we call them, super volunteers, to distinguish them from those who are just commenting on Yammer. And if they sign up, and this is the commitment part, they commit to being part of that. So they sign up to drafting, co-drafting a piece of the strategy, and they choose one of the 6 topics. So we call it thematic groups. And the roles, there were different roles. It's not just drafting. People could say, I don't have the time to draft, but I can comment, etc. Right? So there are different roles. 42 people signed up. I remember I had kickoff calls with all 6 groups like in 2 days. I used a tool that I don't have here, which is about norms, but basically norms are important. Norms are one of those, even I personally, whenever people would tell me, yeah, we need to talk about norms, I was like, yeah, can we move on? Like, we all need to listen to each other. We need to, like respect each other. Like, yeah, okay, we know that. We get it. But community organizing, like, is the stress really. You need to be serious about norms. And you need to have a norm which is about breaking norms, which is not about punishing someone, but just in a fun way, it happens, you didn't do it, why didn't you do it? So, okay, this is we're doing silly selfies in some case, or like sharing something that people just take responsibility. I didn't do it. Say why, and they do something funny and move on. But so norms were this one element I used in these intro calls. And then for each group, there was a person who signed up to be the lead, the coordinator. And this is where it comes to the structure. So I would be the person in the center. I'm coordinating the whole development strategy. But instead of me writing that with my colleagues, my boss, I got people volunteer to draft parts of the strategy. Each person was a coordinator who had the group doing that together with them. And the fun part of this, to me fun because I was like, let's see what happens, I could not foresee, is that every group came up with a different way of how they're going to draft it. I didn't tell them, do it this way. I said, this is the timeline, you have 2 weeks, this is what you're going to draft, this is the whole vision and purpose of strategy. There was an intro document, but how are you going to manage your group? I'm going to give the norms sheet, and I'll give you some tips on how to be a good organizer. I call the coordinator there. But you're going to decide. So there were people who were like, said, okay, we're going to, draft the 2 of us, and then you're going to comment. Everyone's going to comment after 2 days. And some other people decided to brainstorm 3 times before getting anything done and to like work collaboratively by having a call and writing stuff. They were different models, which is amazing for me because I was capturing how different people come with different ways to get in the same goal. They all got, those who have enough people, this is a key word, enough, they got the job done. And so and this is it about how I'm applying in the strategy. The last in the CAM strategy for UNICEF. The last thing I want to say about this, and we have only 5 minutes, is that the public narrative. So I'm not using, any workshops and so on. But what I'm doing, and this is now maybe spontaneous for me, when I talk to the community about the strategy, I'm making sure that we have the same messaging. For example, I came in a situation where people had different opinions on what KM is and what their job is, by the way. And now the message is KM is about making UNICEF work more effective. We are part of the business. We're not the nice side thing. We're not the people, when a donor gives us the money, we do lessons learned. We're not the people who manage SharePoint. We do that, by the way, but that's not the core business, right? So the narrative is important. We're building a narrative together as a community. By building a narrative, we can say this messaging to whoever, right? So we're using a process to do this as well. And the other thing, which is very particular for UNICEF, I said decentralized. One more problem. Most of my community, they're not KM people. They're not paid to do KM. I don't know if you have focal points. That's horrible for them, poor people. Like, these are people who are paid to do something else, like monitoring, evaluation, reporting. And then they're like, oh, by the way, you're going to be the KM focal point, and maybe also research focal point, and evaluation focal point, and gender and like, I have a job, And they're not even given the skills. No one explains what KM is. And so I have really volunteers at work. I'm not joking about it. I have some people who are paid to do KM, but most are focal points for volunteers. And if they're going to do this, we are better able to motivate them to get stuff done. OK, so this is it. Last thing, a message is, OK. Thanks for being here with me. I hope it was useful, interesting. Stay in touch, not just randomly. If you want to apply this, if you're interested, I'm happy to talk more about it. If you want to try it in your organization, we can experiment together like I did. And finally, credits. All the materials you saw, they are by Marshall Gans, Harvard School of Government, so they're not mine. So I know he's cool about sharing materials. He is, in this case, a collaboration community guy, of course. Just make sure to give credit to who developed this. Thank you. And questions?
Questions, reflections? Yes.
Hi, you mentioned that the process of volunteers in the work, do their managers allow them to volunteer? Because I interacted with, volunteers, you should do certain job. If you volunteer with another job,
No, great question. The question is like the people who are volunteers, the focal points, do their managers allow them? So only in 2 cases, I had someone ask me, can you please send an email to my manager? And I had my boss send an email. The other thing, other people asked me to make sure that their director, so high level, not direct boss, eventually know about what they're doing. So far, maybe I was lucky, but no one had the issue about 2 people, which is not a big issue, just an email about doing this. But they do want to make sure they have recognition, the formal recognition eventually. Uh-huh.
and he's doing an important job, but he wants to volunteer. So he was hired as a developer. You understand?
No, yes. I mean, so this case, their KM focal points is an advantage. It's not their TOR, job description, but still their formal focal point, right? When they are not, then there's the case when they ask for the email. In one case, I had a person who said, look, my job, I really need this because my job is not very creative, and this compensates for that. This is a good thing. When you look for volunteers and among your colleagues, make sure, this is why it has to be motivating. This is an opportunity to do something that's different from what you usually do. No matter if you love your job, this can be an opportunity to do something different. And they will do it. I mean, I don't agree with this, but they will still do it because they just love it. I mean, this is my experience.
We have a question over here.
Hi, my name is Eleanor. I come from a small international development organization. We use a model really similar to this. So a question about sustaining those volunteers. What are your strategies for continuing to motivate, make sure they don't burn out,
Yeah.
reduce high turnover,
Yeah.
something that we see?
So burnout is key. This is not my professional experience. The other experience I had volunteering, burnout is key because I've been doing this for a long time with volunteering. And be clear, your responsibility as an organizer, leader, is to make sure people don't overcommit. Sometimes you're so good at building narrative commitment, especially when it's about issues people care about. They overcommit and they're going to do it. And then one day they're just going to be burnout and drop. That's the worst thing you can have. You're using human capital. Sometimes you need to kind of control them, which is a good problem to have if you know how to manage it. But I think up front, if you see someone's committed too much, say, please just pick one thing. Don't do both. And I have this open conversation. That's my experience on burnout. The turnover, I think, is the model. Like, because you're developing leaders, then whenever someone moves on, there's someone who can step in. This is my experience at World Bank communities. We had this issue. We would have, they're leadership-driven, the communities at the World Bank. They used to be, I mean, most of them. But then the question was, when a person moves on, who replaces a person? And I think if you apply this model, you know how to do it.
We have one more question. Yes, ma'am.
When you had the 6 different groups write the 6 sessions, did you find out that you had to do a lot of rework to make the final document sound like it had one voice?
That's what I'm doing right now. Next year, or even earlier, I can share that experience. It's tough. I'm happy. I love this approach. I don't regret it, but it's a lot of work for me. And again, I'm not doing it by myself. Now I have a group of 10 people, so I reduced from 42 to 10, who are CAM experts. This time it's not everyone who wants. And it's tough. It's a lot of work, but I think it's worth it because I think I already did a survey with the community, and the feedback I got, the one I love the most, is like people are energized, excited about a strategy, and they feel a sense of ownership. And one person, country office, told me, Ivan, usually what happens, UNICEF, headquarters tells us what to do, has documents about processes and stuff, and say, hey, you should do this and comply. And this is amazing because you are asking us to do this with you. And I think in organizations that are so decentralized, there's a lot of needs, because sometimes we think that they just don't care, they do own stuff, but sometimes maybe we are not good in headquarters about involving people. So, yeah.
I just have one observation, if you will permit me, which is that on 2 occasions, it seemed like you were being quite opportunistic. So with the World Bank thing, you were supposed to be teaching them about community organizing, and then you very sneakily got them into it. And with the UNICEF one, the strategy instruction comes down, you say, well, hey, let's feed community organizing into this. So it seems to me that there is an element of opportunism in the midst of all this.
Yeah.
Is that a fair comment?
I think it is fair comment. I think, and this is, like, I wish I was at Philips, unless I hope that's what describe as reality. But the World Bank and UNICEF organizations where it's really difficult to do this stuff. You don't have the CEO who says, hey, we're going to improve the way we work more effective. CAM is crucial. Let's do it. And here's the money, by the way. I mean, that's a dream for me. I wish one day I could do that. So you need to be opportunistic. I think you need to think constantly how I can improve, learn from other fields, and take the opportunities. Right now, for example, I'm learning about the way UNICEF does stuff, and now they do this midterm review. And I'm like, okay, how can we pitch knowledge management and the strategy we're doing, by the way, right now, to make sure we help UNICEF become better at the results they're doing, and so connect with our people. So I think you have to be opportunity all the time when no one is like telling you, Ivan, do it, here's the money, here's the resources.
Let's thank Ivan.
Thank you.